Steps back, throws a fade, back shoulder. Cooper Kupp got it! Cooper Kupp brings it in!
Welcome back, football DFS fans, to another edition of the Touchdowns for Dough show. We are international this week because we have... I can't even remember what you called him before we went on air. Mark,
Saint Jack of Humphrey.
That wasn't what was in my head then. It rhymed with, it sort of went with that, but not quite the same. Yeah, so Jack, where are you? You've not mentioned it, I don't think. I don't recall anyway. It doesn't look like your lounge.
I'm in the lovely warmth of Portugal. It's been 24 degrees here today. Absolutely lovely. So yeah, I'm enjoying life, and yeah, it doesn't take me 8 months to send someone a football jersey either.
Early.
Sorry?
I said he's gone early.
Yeah, a minute into the show.
I'm entitled, aren't I, as well? So you know, I might dye my hair ginger. I might dye my hair ginger soon.
Oh God, he's gone early. I was gonna ease it in and kind of like warm it into the show, but Jack just said, "You know what?
You should know me better now by now."
Yeah,
anyway,
indeed. But do you know what? Lovely tweet that, Jack. Lovely about the jersey. Very nice letter. Made their days. I'm just wondering why you've never sent me a jersey. Like when. Do with one of them.
You're too busy taking my money in DFS half the time, Nick. This is why I don't do it. So.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go. 3 minutes in. We've already got the slating in, and we've got the winning. So yeah, for those who didn't know, because
those who didn't know.
I've not mentioned this either. So you know,
Nick, can I just derail you a second? Can I just derail you 1 second, just to keep your powder dry on that one. Jack, just talk about that shirt thing. What a Saturday evening it was on the Twitter. The fantasy football community just rallied round Martin to get his jersey from a influencer loving major sports brand, and the way everybody pulled together and just battered them was absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, it was great. I mean, I'm doing the show tonight on a bed, so you know, all the hot takes are coming from Jack's bed tonight. I might be on I'm sorry, I won't mention them. I might be on. Begins. It's a number, so in the 800s.
Are you wearing the short shorts though, Jack? That's what people need to know.
I'm in my pants shirt. So.
Sorry, Nick. I had to just mention it. It was just such a great thing Saturday night. I mean, if you had no life like me and you're watching Twitter, that was like just fantastic.
Anyway, Nick, let's tell the good folks like why
you know what,
win. So let's go.
I reckon take a picture in your shorts on your bed and change the Twitter handle to Jack and the Algarve, and like. That's just think of the followers. Think of the companies that would approach you.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that company muted for well over a year, and as Mark says, the Twitter community rallied behind Martin on Saturday. So I got to see their sort of feed for the first time in over a year, and my God, I remembered why I'd muted them. The content on that website is absolutely garbage.
Yeah, and continues to be. I think there was a tweet earlier about some show that they do called Hunt.
Pardon?
It began with P, Mark.
Okay,
it was,
sorry.
Yeah, but it may as well be the other thing. But yeah, do you know what? Absolute disgrace to that company. If we ran a competition, and do you know what? There's other people that have ran competitions like that in the community like Murph and stuff like that have stumped up their own cash to make sure that someone gets that whatever they're promised for that competition, they get it. And the good people in the community, they stand by their word. They do not take 8 months to get a prize to someone. So fucking shame on you. But yeah, we'll keep that in.
We'll move on to the winners win section. Nick.
Onto the winners win, hashtag winners win. So
hashtag Nick wins again.
That's
three this year, Nick.
Well,
Ashes, Nat Coombs, and now Fantasy Game Day.
Yeah.
6 weeks, Nick. 3 wins, 6 weeks.
The actually made a graphic this week.
Yeah, funny that. Actually, it looks like he spent a lot of time on it as well.
Yeah, it does,
just only an hour or so, Matt. Do you know what? As I was,
I knew you were going to show up tonight, Nick. So you know.
Well, on the subject of showing up, Mark, Jack is in Portugal and he's
I know.
Like,
he hasn't. The difference is he hasn't got a 6-year-old in the room next to him who needs to sleep. That's the difference.
The temperature was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hope it's cold.
It is freezing here.
Shout out to the fellas at Fantasy Gameday App. So we all entered again this week. And I took it down. I believe Rich Cooling also came second and pushed me really closely. Rich, who is more commonly known as Dynasty Island on Twitter, and is still relatively new to the DFS world as well. And he admittedly will say he dabbles, but doesn't dabble massively. So it's nice to see him get a big win. But yeah, some small enhancements to the graphic this week, Mark, as you pointed out.
The symmetry is so beautiful.
The symmetry is nice. I've made the scores stand out slightly more by different colour. I've put the positions in there, the names are in there. To remove any doubt, I've also put the first initial. And
you're going to do this every week going forward now?
Right. I might do.
If he wins.
To this standard.
Yeah.
This has evolved every week. This is just a new phase of it. I look at the little captain badge as well. I'm very happy with that. Like, really happy with the little captain. That looks good. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the lineup, following on from what we said on last week's show, Mark, where you said about the picking a captain in this format, and I had a little think about it when I was building my lineup, and I'm thinking, who realistically could go off for a big score this week? Like, and I'm not talking you kind of like that's a good score, like a Kamara, for example, at 17.4. That's a good score, but that's probably his ceiling at the moment based on how he's being used, based on how the New Orleans Saints offense plays. But with Achan down, I thought, do you know what? The path opens once again to Mostert. Saw quite a few people on McCaffrey. I thought that was a tough road game for San Francisco, to be honest. I didn't even have McCaffrey in my lineup. This shows. So I was willing to go against that. And I thought, Raheem Mostert, what kind of went in my favour? I stacked Hill with Tua as well. But Hill went down. I think it was in the beginning of the fourth quarter, maybe. He broke off a big reception, and then he limped off and went pretty much straight down the tunnel, smiling. I think you said on the chat, Matt, that they've probably just pulled him and he won't be playing the rest of the quarter. And that kind of played to my advantage because he was going off. But I owned him. Anyone who captained him wasn't getting the double points. Those people owned Mostert, but I was then getting the double points off the work that Mostert was mopping up. So yeah, that means the rest of the lineup, like Jack said last week, it's not always difficult this game. It is because there is luck involved, and we'll talk about luck shortly. But I just played people who I thought had a high ceiling or a safe floor, shall we say. So Kamara, I think at the moment, with how the Saints playing, Derek Carr, question mark, still is he 100%? The little dump off passes, even when Kamara doesn't break off massive runs, he gets the little dump off passes. He accumulates yards that way, he accumulates catches. ETN, I just like that game for him. Other teams were successfully able to run on the Colts, so I like that. Osborne, the opportunity share was potentially there. He was also cheap. Jacobs, a bit disappointing, but he was played with the right intentions. His workload's been increasing over the weeks, and New England have absolutely stunk in recent weeks. So I gathered Bill's game plan would probably be to try and scheme Devontae Adams out of the game and maybe leave some gaps for Jacobs. And then Dalton Schultz was the other. He, again, cheap, but he's seen more targets in recent weeks. Red zone looks as well after his slow start of single figures the first few weeks. So, yeah, that's pretty much all the kind of thought process that went into this lineup. There wasn't a massive amount of kind of stats that I looked at. I just looked at some of the recent games, recent performances, and this is what I put together.
I really like the lineup, Nick. You've got a couple of pieces that I locked into every DFS lineup before I caught my flight to Portugal. So I'd lock Raheem must start into every lineup, and Travis Etienne I'd lock both them into all of my DFS lineups across the slate, and Jacoby Myers was my other guy that I had. But yeah, I really like the lineup. You know my feelings on the Dolphins stats anyway. When I have a rule, whenever they or the Bengals are on the main slate, I will lock Tua or Burrow in with a stack. They just, as I say, I review MIDI lineups every week and go back over seasons and seasons. And the last two seasons, Tua and Burrow have been in the MIDI maker winner lineup at an alarming rate. So, love that. Always love the Dolphins in that spot. I love the Dalton Schultz play as well, actually. I think he was probably really low owned at tight end. A lot of people think the Saints defense is elite against tight ends. It's not. It's not anymore. They're giving up quite a few touchdowns and yardage to tight ends, and then of course the Houston wide receiver core was banged up anyway, so the targets had to go somewhere, and Schultz was going to be the man. Really like the play there. Yeah, I really like the lineup across the board. What you've done with it.
I think the thing about Mostert as captain, it was generally quite a low-scoring week across DFS anyway. But there was last week, there was only a handful. You know, we talked about you can either play, there's a handful of players you can play who can potentially score 50 points, which could be doubled up to 100. But that's a really small handful of players. And last week, Mostert was one of them because of the nature of a Chan being out and all that. And other than that, other than that, I think you go very low and try and find, I don't know, like a Drake London, it would have been last week or something like that, which allows you to pay up elsewhere. However, the nature of last week's scoring and everything, this sort of context of that slate alone meant you were better playing the higher, potential high scoring captain, which then worked out because Mostert was the highest scorer and stuff. There'll be other weeks where you're better playing the Drake London, for want of a better phrase, because I'm just using him because he scored 24 points and he was quite cheap. There'll be other weeks in the context slate, he'll be the better option because it'll allow you to get in more of the high price players. Like if Cup and Chase, had scored a lot of points as well as Hill, any way you could get all three of them in a lineup you'd probably win or be up there. But this week, because of the nature of the scoring, that lineup was perfect for it. The Dalton Schultz one was the one that surprised me. I understood your reasoning for everything. Dalton Schultz I wasn't sure about until just now. But it's a cracking play. Houston just really good for fantasy at the moment. Doesn't matter what site you're using, they're not being priced up properly, and they can score some points. The thing I just quickly say about the Saints, just want to keep an eye on because Derek Carr is just throwing for so many yards at the moment, isn't he? It's just ridiculous. It's just the amount of throws, the amount of throwing he's doing is absolutely mad. So he hasn't really had the touchdowns at the moment, but they may well come. I think Kamara's got a four touchdown game in him at some point. You know.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Um,
it'll definitely come.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that lineup. The great thing about the Miami stack was everybody had talked themselves off this Miami stack when it got towards the end of the week, hadn't they? It was all about
It's a great matchup as
Rams.
well.
Yeah, no,
Great
everything
matchup.
about it was great. Everything about it was great. Yeah, and everybody talked themselves off it and stuff. So there you go.
Which is what we're saying. You don't overcomplicate things. Like the Dalton Schultz play, if you look into it, it's a good play. Banged up wide receiver core.
Yeah.
If you look deeper into it, the Saints are bad against tight ends this year. Everything was perfect for that game scenario for Dalton Schultz to have a decent day. And then look how many touchdowns the Panthers have given up to running backs this season. I mean, I think it was 2 in week 1, 2 in week 2, 2 in week 3. Just off the top of my head from memory. Perfect scenario. And like I said, whenever the Dolphins or the Bengals are on the main slate, I'm locking them both in.
Yeah. And what you've said about Schultz there, Jack, is exactly, I'd read about the Saints against Titans, so I'd read that stat myself. And when I was looking at I think Robert Woods, Tank Dell were both questionable. I think it was only Hollins who was healthy.
Tank Dell didn't play at all.
Yeah, so it's exactly that thought process that went into it. The other point that I was just going to make as well, like Mostert, I mean, I don't think we see the ownership numbers on this game. Mostert looked like he was quite highly owned, but surprisingly not highly captained. So when I looked at a lot of the teams that were around me at the top, as it was kind of getting to the end of the 6 p.m. games, he was in most lineups, but he just wasn't captained. And I think
11 lineups had him captained.
yeah,
They tweeted that out.
138
Yeah.
lineups, I think there was it, and this is the week where they've had the most entries as well. So congrats, Fantasy Gameday App for that. Yeah, I mean 11 lineups. That's it. Even if another 60, 70 lineups owned him, the fact that only 11 captained him and he went off like he did, it just shows that when it comes to the captain, at least in this, I don't think ownership really matters that much. Plus, it's a smaller field anyway, so ownership isn't a massive, I guess, not a massive thing that you want to kind of keep in mind with this. You do want some differences in your lineup, but most at being highly owned, the key thing with him this week was actually playing him in the captain spot and him smashing. Like if someone else owned him, then if he was highly owned, that's fine. It's the fact that you get in that ×2 multiplier on him. That's the thing.
I on my lineup, I say we've got a few of the similar plays here, but I'd captained Jamar Chase, and now going back at it, granted I didn't really have a lot of time on Sunday to muck around with lineups, not as much time as I normally like. I like a good 3 or 4 hours mucking around with lineups before lock. But looking back at it, it was probably a bad play playing Jamar Chase. I don't know how highly owned in the captain spot he was. I mean, he didn't have a particularly great game. He was fine, but he didn't have like one of these explosion games that you can have. But I would have thought he was quite highly owned in the captain spot. And looking back at it now, it's a bad play on my part. And if I would have liked to have thought if I had the time that I normally dedicate to my DFS lineups on a Sunday, I would have got off of it anyway.
Yeah.
Still cash though. So,
that's winners win.
yeah.
Just you mentioned, Jack, then about was it Mark who said that people had started kind of like talk themselves off tour. So kind of dovetailing into one of the things that what I was going to discuss tonight was around like narratives and value. I saw a lot last week. A lot of people were pushing Gardner Minshew in lineup because he was what was he like 4,600 was he? Like I can't not mention it, Mark. I can't. 4,600.
He was 5k on DK.
5k.
5k
Okay.
on DK, yeah.
Like I understand why people would look at that and think like, 5k, good value. Does it allow you to do a massive amount throughout the rest of your lineup? Yeah, it might allow you to upgrade a position and kind of get you slightly stronger somewhere. But the way that I would construct my lineups anyway, I'm paying down at positions like tight end normally. I'm paying down at defense. I've normally got enough where I can kind of build the rest of my lineup and think, do you know what? I can afford to pay up for a more premium quarterback who will have a safer floor and more than likely a higher ceiling. Because even though we've seen it from Gardner Minshew in his career, I got to a point where I was like, have people forgotten that this guy, since his debut season with Jacksonville, where he went a respectable 6-6, in terms of games that he'd started, he's only won 3 games in games that he started in his NFL career, dating back to 2020. And like, have I missed something with Gardner Minshew? I must have, because the traction he was getting last week, and I'm like, Joe Burrow's reasonably priced on this slate, Tua's on this slate, like Matt Stafford was priced really nicely on this slate. There was loads. Jared Goff's playing really well at the moment. There was plenty quarterbacks that were priced a little bit more expensive, but not where you'd have to significantly pay up. And I was just like, so many people are on Minshew, and I just think the moral of it for me was, if you've followed that content and made the decision to put him in your lineup, that's fine, but just be mindful of value doesn't always equal valuable in a lineup. Like, especially at that position, like quarterback is notoriously one of your highest scoring positions.
Not this week, it wasn't. It was so low scoring quarterback. Jared Goff was number 1, wasn't he, with 25 points? It was really low scoring. That's what created this environment for this week. That's why Desmond Ridder ended up... Sorry.
He wasn't. Ridder was the number 1 QB this week.
Was he? Okay. It's about 25 points anyway, where it rolls. Yeah. Ridder was in the optimal with... and Drake London was with Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts only scored 14 points or 13 points, I think. But that's a symptom of the fact it was a really low scoring week. Normally, a quarterback score a lot more than that. It was quite interesting because actually everybody was focusing on that Minshew stack and how cheap that was, but actually that Atlanta one was the optimal. That came through. Again, actually there was a site, the 1 week season guys had actually pushed that Atlanta stack, which is why the guy who won the Millie, who is a 1 week season sub, and 1 week season guys won a lot of stuff because he actually pushed that mini stack. I don't get the Minshew thing at all. I did have a Minshew lineup, funnily enough, and it was my best scoring lineup, which shows how bad my week went. But that was because I put him with Pittman as well.
He did go for 329 yards. He did have a touchdown, but he obviously threw 3 interceptions in that game. I agree with you. I agree. Yeah, but I agree with you, Nick. It's the value. Like, you have to look at the rest of who else is on the slate. Like, so if you look at it, like you say, Matthew Stafford was cheap. Joe Burrow was too cheap. I think I put in our WhatsApp group. I know Joe Burrow. Looking back at it, Joe Burrow didn't get there, but I put in our WhatsApp group that Joe Burrow was too cheap on the slate. Whereas, like the other week, I'm going back to the lineup I used. I used that O'Connell, the Raiders quarterback, but he was 4,000, and if you jammed him in, you could literally put every stud in your lineup. And I'd put CMC in that lineup, and it's the same week CMC goes in for like 4 touchdowns. And O'Connell was fine, like he was just bang average. But I just cashed in every lineup that I built with O'Connell. I just cashed. But then there's the value difference. You're saying Minshew was 5,000 this week. You could have just paid up a little bit more and got to Stafford, who was, better.
Yeah, I just like, and Minshew, when you look at the score, he wasn't that bad. I think he probably hit value, but I just I was looking at how much he was recommended and how talked about he was, and I was just I feel like I've seen a different Gardner Minshew during his career because it just there was quarterbacks that were priced near him that I think you could have played that would have a safer floor week to week. Even Ridder, I messaged you both in the chat and said, "My God, Desmond Ridder is shite," but he offers you a safe floor because he also rushes.
He was also
Like
playing Paul
all
Washington
shot.
as well, so that helped him with his
Yeah,
safe floor. The
yeah.
thing about Minshew this week was there's only Pittman who scored any points to
Yep.
stack with him, and most people who were doing that were doing a 2-man stack of some sort. So I think that's the
Colts,
difference.
Colts are such a weird team as well when it comes to receivers because, even Pittman is just so underwhelming there at receiver. There doesn't Pittman can break off the odd play, but doesn't feel like there's any kind of big play guys there. Whereas at least like in Atlanta, for example, you know that Drake London's capable of a big game. Kyle Pitts has been quiet, but the ability's there. It's just such a weird team, Indianapolis. Even the weeks this year where I think there's 1 week I played Anthony Richardson. I just played him on his own because I just don't trust any of the passing options there.
Yeah, I think. By the way, Pittman was only a couple of points behind Drake London this week.
Yeah, he's reasonably good. You know what I mean? But he's just
he's like a poor man. He's like a poor man's Amon-Ra St. Brown, really. That's how I feel he is. And he came back with a vengeance. My God, every time he's fit, I play him, and then I just he just wasn't on my radar this week at all. And then look, he was like, if he wasn't the highest scoring wide receiver, he was definitely close. I think he might have been.
The Colts, the receivers there, like you said, Pittman only a few points behind, and he's had some good weeks this year. But I always whenever I see it, I always feel like his name pops up in that price range where you're like, "Ooh, I don't really like this. I'll go a little bit further down." It's like picking up a packet of digestives at Asda and getting home and realizing they're not the ones that have the chocolate on and they're just the plain ones, and you're just like, "Oh." It's just.
Does that happen to you often, Nick?
I'm not even that much of a biscuit person, but I would if you. But yeah, there we go. I think you just be careful of narratives, be careful of the value that gets pushed. Value isn't always valuable, as I said. We want
to look at what else is on the slate. You need to look.
Absolutely.
And Joe, like I say, I know he didn't get there, but Joe Burrow was the true value really at quarterback this week.
Yeah, I mean, he could have gone off. That's the thing. You're playing for that potential, and we've seen that potential from Joe Burrow consistently. Can Minshew have those games? Yes. Does he have them consistently? No, because he doesn't even usually start. So
no, you don't have to preach that to me. I've had this discussion with many Eagles fans about Nick Foles, who they just worship the ground on and think he's an elite quarterback, which he's not.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Joe Flacco's won a Super Bowl, just for everyone's information.
Yep, indeed. One of the things we did want to discuss last week that we unfortunately ran out of time was around luck. There was a tweet, wasn't there, which prompted this discussion around luck. But yeah, Mark, I know you had a couple of thoughts around luck in DFS, and just to be absolutely clear, is not Andrew Luck; it's just Luck.
Actually, that tweet came afterwards. I was already going to do my. This is right. You two are too young to remember the two Ronnies, but anybody who's old enough to remember this is there's always a bit in that show where Ronnie Corbett sat down on a chair and told a joke, and that's when you usually went to go and get a cup of tea. This is that bit of the show. So everyone go and get their cup of tea now. So the reason I want to talk about it because people don't talk about it enough. They don't talk about what it actually means in DFS and how you take advantage of it. So I was first introduced to this concept only a few years ago, really. I've been playing DFS for about 4 years, and then I was lucky enough to get to know some professional and high-stake players from the UK. You met one of them, Nick, in the in the box the other week. David, who's a high stake player, or certainly used to be. And the thing I find, especially from the professional guys, is every time they binked, they just said how lucky they got. And there was never any I'm proud of my lineup and all that. It was just like, yeah, got lucky there and all this sort of stuff. And it wasn't, and some of it is modesty, but generally I don't think it was, because these guys, that's how they make their living. I know Ben said last week you can't make your living from luck, but actually you definitely can when you understand what it means in betting and stuff. And Jack has talked about that on the show before, with his 90-1 bets or whatever, on 2 touchdowns and stuff. If that comes in once in every 10 times, then you make money. You don't have to, it's not about luck, it's about odds. Anyway, so something you hear me saying here a lot, I've said it a lot, is that DFS is about maximizing your winnings when you get lucky. I actually got that from a professional player. I think his name was Drew Dinkmar. I think he works for Establish the Run now. He said it when he was winning a lot of Showdown and stuff. And once I understood it, it was a real turning point in how I play my DFS, not only in success of it, but also actually enjoying it. So, we were talking before the show, Nick, this ties in with everything. We've been talking about this so far. Jack's been talking about Showdown dupes all year. I think this is like the first week we haven't talked about it. And I think that phrase about maximizing winnings can be more appropriate, because if you think about those dupes, those people came first in a Milli Maker and they only won $10,000, say. I think that's been pretty much the average so far. Yep. Weird enough, yesterday a guy won a milli. But anyway, we'll come back to that maybe later. But then these guys have won a 10k. They're not going to come first in a Milli Maker again. The odds just are too stacked against them. The number of people who've actually won more than one Milli Maker is ridiculously small, and usually they've done it in more than one sport. They're multi-sport DFS players, professionals. So those guys, their chance is kind of gone. And so I think everybody understands there is luck in DFS. I think if you're a content creator, you can't say there's luck in DFS, because you're trying to convince people that you can predict the future better than everybody else. That's what they're paying you for. So you can't say, yeah, we just get lucky and stuff. So how do we really use this for as well, to our advantage? Well, it ties in with everything we've been talking about this season, about all the education, the strategy stuff we've been talking about. Let's use you an example, Jack. When you had your 10k win in your showdown, your soccer showdown, you had a centre back as captain, didn't you? If I remember that right. Yeah. Okay. So you weren't saying necessarily you thought that guy was going to score. What you did was and I don't think I'm wrong about this, you basically weighed up the chances of him scoring, weighed that up against how much you would win if he did score, like you do with your bets, exactly the same thing. And on that occasion, he did score. No one else. I think it was a 1-0, wasn't it?
No, it was 2-1 game.
2-1 game.
He scored the first goal.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So a couple of things have to go your way for it to happen. But because you knew hardly anybody else was captaining that centre back, if it did go your way, you would do well, and you did. You're literally the living embodiment of that concept. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to do a little bit of a thought exercise with you two, and it's a bit unfair because I've not told you about this. Okay?
All right.
So if I told both of you, you've got to use your brains now. If I told both of you that if you entered every Milli Maker this season, at some point you will come in first place. Okay? Now, it doesn't matter what you do, at some point you will come in first place. Knowing that, what would you actually do? How would you make your lineups?
I personally build my lineups.
Yeah, but forget what you do. This is a really silly example. Because silly extreme examples are a great way to make a point, because then you sort of come down to something more realistic. So you're going to come first, no matter what, at some point. I'm not going to tell you when, but at some point you're going to come first. How do you build your lineups?
Am I going to do for?
No, I'm not telling you that. That's the point. I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying you're going to come first. You're on the right lines, though, Jack. Because what you should be doing is building the most ridiculous lineup as possible, so nobody dupes you. Because you know you're going to win.
That's what I was going to say to you. I would build my lineup to come last.
Yeah.
I would rather come last than I would
Yeah.
rather come last and be middle of the pack or just min cap.
Yeah.
That's how I build my large GPP
Yeah.
lineup.
Using my silly example, you'd leave like 40,000 on the table or something because you know you're going to become first at some point. You just don't want to dupe. Okay. So that concept is ridiculous, but actually it's what you should be doing in a slightly more realistic way. You want to build lineups that have that chance to do that well, but they've got to be unique enough that you maximise your winnings. That's both in Classic and Main. In Classic, as I spoke to you about with combinatorial ownership, I'm not talking about you duping your whole lineup because that doesn't happen in Mains. Talking about giving yourself more chances by having less of the same sort of blocks, as if wants a better phrase. So yeah, that was really all it was. That's how you use luck. I think we naturally use it without sort of saying we're using luck, just by how we build our lineups, I think, and the way we strategize about this stuff.
On this subject, Mark, could you imagine if I'd captained Tony Jones that week?
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's how you get rid of these dupes, and
Yeah,
because the optimizer. This is what we're saying about the optimizing. None of them are going to spit out Tony Jones in the captain spot at you.
no. And it's the same thing. You're not saying that you think Tony Jones is going to score twice. You just know that the returns, if it happens, are greater than our chances of it happening. And that's basically how you use luck in DFS.
Yeah, we've spoke kind of on and off about this for years, haven't we, Mark? When we first started doing this show, under 5 yard, like we spoke about this years back, when like I remember getting frustrated on one of the shows, and I was like, why are people so like, why are they speaking so matter of fact about what's going to happen when we don't, it's not happened yet. It hasn't happened. Like this how much luck can play a part. You could be a running back breaking through the line. You know, I'm thinking of Todd Gurley is the first one that comes to mind here. Breaking through the line, a minute and a half left in the game, no timeouts. Rather than running the ball in, takes a knee at the 2-yard line. Yeah. It's happened. It's happened in real life. Other running backs have done it. I think Nick Chubb did it the other year as well.
Yeah. Someone lost a milli because the quarterback took a knee.
Yeah.
And that's unlucky, but that's also
yeah.
By the way, if you're trying to predict the future and you've got in your head like this is the perfect game script, I don't know, the Panthers are the bottom of the table against the running back, so I have to play Christian. Let's just say they're playing the 49ers. I have to play Christian McCaffrey in the captain spot because the Panthers are dead last in the league against the running backs. I can guarantee you 80% of the rest of that mini maker field are going to be thinking exactly the same as you. So the way, as Mark says there, the way you get different is you think out of the box. And I done it the other week in that I can't remember who the Eagles were playing on that showdown, but no one wanted the running backs because they were like, this Eagles backfield is a mess. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to captain one of the running backs and hope they go off. And I captained Swift, and he went nuts. So you have to think outside the box.
Yeah. The other thing is you're not trying to get. If you think you're going to get it right every week, then you're basically doing yourself a disservice. But when you do get it right, you want to be winning it. You want to be doing well. And Jack's centre-back lineup that he won his 10 grand on. Exact classic example of it. It's why I don't know if you do it, Nick, but I pretty much always play defenders in that spot now.
I don't tend to play showdown in football.
Oh, okay, fine.
If I did, that's what I'd be doing.
I done it last season. No, not last season. It must have been the season before when Chelsea played Leicester again. It was the same match, and I captained Rudiger again. I pretty much built the same lineup as that winning one, and then Rudiger scored the first goal again. I thought, here we go. I was rubbing my hands together, and then I think Chelsea ended up getting beat. I think Chelsea got beat 2-1. So he went the other way, and he went against me this time. But I was close again.
And the thing is, in that scenario, is it's a believable outcome that they could have won 1-0, So straight away, you're getting the clean sheet points. Anything else that has accumulated within that time as well, the passing numbers, whatever it might be, tackles. And then you say, well, a centre-back, more often than not, if a team gets a corner or a free kick in attacking place, they're sending at least one, most of the time, two of the centre-backs up. So,
he was scoring that year as well. I think Rudiger was scoring that year. He'd had a couple of goals.
Yeah, I mean, he comes up. Yeah, he comes up from. Yeah, he was coming up all the time for corners and things. It's the same. I do it, and I always go for the big centre back. Like I do it in every showdown. So if it's Arsenal, I go for Saliba, for example. If it's Chelsea, I go for Thiago Silva or Colwell now. But like it's just it's the same. It's the same principle.
But Nick, the really good thing that you just mentioned there is it's. I used a really silly example in that thought exercise with you two, but it's got to be a lineup that's got a chance to do it. You're just trying to find that balance between my ridiculous example to a really overly owned team. You're trying to find that somewhere in the middle. And then you just got to hope it happens. And if it doesn't happen, you just go pat yourself on the back, tell yourself how proud you are of your lineup, and move on to the next week.
Oh, proud lineups have popped up again.
Contest selection is key. We'll go into more. I think we'll do that next week because we're already going long here tonight. So we'll do contest selection.
Sorry, that's my fault again.
No, you're fine. You wanted to get that off your chest because we had a really good show.
For 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. No, we had a really good show last week with Ben. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, we'll do the contest selection next week. I want to get into double ups and why I think they are the best way to build your bankroll. There is no other tournament like them.
We'll talk about that next week. But I guess we can sign off then with wisdomous advice that cash is king, cash lineups are king, and you stand by that, Jack. But we'll expand on it more next week. A blast as always. Is there anything else that you want to get off your chest, fellas, before Jack gets back to his sun lounger?
No, I was going to say, sign up to Fantasy Gameday App with our code TDs4D, and you'll get a free entry after your initial deposit and first entry into a contest on there.
Of course. Probably should have said that at the start, shouldn't we, when we were looking at my lineup? But there you go.
Did your lineup do well, Nick?
Humble brag.
It won, and you guys better hope I don't go back to back this week.
I haven't won yet on that app, so I must be due.
If I go back to back, I don't even want to think about what I'm going to be like on next week's show. But if it happens,
on the plus side, we'll have a really nice graphic.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, and Nick, when you take down multiple GPPs, talk to me, mate. Right?
You're just dining out on that, like.
He said, "Yeah." What have you done lately, Jack? What have you done lately?
Well, I did take a Europe League down.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Live on air.
Yeah. So I might. Do you know what? If I go back to back, I might even get that video ready for next week, and we'll play that video. Yeah. Right, lovely. At Nick O'Wigan, at Jack Humphrey DFS, and at _SMRF on the X/the Twitter/ whatever it is called nowadays. And we will see you next Tuesday.